So Jurassic World Rebirth is another Jurassic World film, but one from director Gareth Edwards. And, Gareth Edwards, he always does, visually appealing films. Like, I love the way that, he's worked on stuff like, the Godzilla films and the Creator, just amazing films to look at. But unfortunately, and this is a problem with a lot of his films, too, is that, yeah, they're gorgeous to look at, but sometimes they don't really have the best scripts here. And this is very much the case with Jurassic World Rebirth, despite having a screenplay by David Koepp, who has written on previous Jurassic Park films. So you think, okay, this is a skilled writer. He has a lot of history with Jurassic Park, so, maybe he can come in and offer something up refreshing. But the story that he serves up with Rebirth is just kind of... It's pretty routine here. The whole story is just a group of mercenaries and scientists end up going to this island of all these mutated dinosaurs because they got to get mutant dino DNA so that, they can develop this drug that, that will basically, cure a lot of problems that people have with, their hearts. So basically, they need mutant dino DNA so that they can, cure human illness, and they go on this dangerous trip to an island and all the expected, hallmarks that come along with that. Which is kind of, it's a little disappointing that the film kind of settles on that Lost World premise a little too easily, just because, the world that they're trying to set up with this Jurassic World sequel is probably the most interesting. Like, this exists in... at this point in the story, dinosaurs have been around for a long time. They become commonplace in society, but the interest has kind of waned and they've died off, where it's pretty much it's looking like they're about ready to be extinct. There's maybe a few blocking traffic here and there, which I thought was kind of neat, but they don't really go into it more than that because the film is so busy trying to just get the wheels in motion to go down the same trail that it's been down before. So we establish a lot of characters who are very, very, very basic. They barely took off the placeholder text here. So you have Scarlett Johansson playing Zora Bennett, who's basically, a mercenary. She has her little moments of cocky dialogue here and there. You have Duncan Kincaid, another mercenary leader played by Marshala Ali. Very thankless role for the character. They do give him something to fight for, but he's pretty much doing the same bit as Scarlett Johansson. You have Dr. Henry Loomis, played by Jonathan Bailey. He's a paleontologist who's basically spent his entire life studying dinosaurs, but hasn't really, got to see them out in the wild. So going to the island would be a big experience for him. Fantastic adventure, fish out of water type stuff. And then you have Rupert Friend playing Martin Krebs, a pharmaceutical representative, who's basically a greedy executive. He's coming along on the trip so that he can get the dino DNA and willing to sacrifice human life if he has to the point where he pretty much says it. And, there is one scene in this film that I think perfectly encapsulates the entire reason for it being, the story that it is, which is, once they get to the island, Scarlett Johansson's character of Zora basically calls out everybody for their intentions here and simplifies it almost too easily. She just basically goes around each person. She says okay, you're here for the money. You're here for the money. She gets the executive. You're here for all the money. So let's just get the job done and go home. And that's very much what this feels like. It feels like this is just, another job within the Jurassic World franchise. You get to the island, you encounter some dinosaurs, you get into some, near-death experiences with them, you narrowly avoid getting chomped to death, a few people do get chomped to death, and then you make a daring escape off the island. And what is so frustrating about that is it's just... It's so close to, having, it's got the basic formula down, and it has great visuals, but it's just it needs that extra kick, that charms. It's not a bad thing that you have the characters just, just the mercenary, the scientist, and the executive, but there's got to be something more to them. They can't just be there to spout exposition and, offer up some, passive, character descriptions here and there. The original Jurassic Park had some charm. You felt for the characters. They had some witty and funny lines. And the thing is, you can see the potential there because there are some genuinely funny lines here, but they're only once in a, like, every few scenes here, and it's just basically like a few one-liners here. It's like, okay, that was pretty funny. Like, at one point they're saying like, oh, the people we were tracking, maybe they passed through. It's like, how do you know they're not someone else's footprints? What? Yeah, someone else on this island wearing Nikes. It's like, not a bad line, pretty funny. And at that point, I was almost willing to like force a laugh at that point, because I'm just like, I need something more to care about these characters besides just like the basic archetypes here. Not to mention, we have a whole other group in this film of a family of a single dad and his two daughters, and his daughter's obnoxious boyfriend coming along for the trip. So then, of course, we fulfill like the Amblin angle of just putting kids in danger, but having them narrowly escape a T-Rex biting off their limbs and stuff like that. So typical Jurassic Park stuff here, and just. I'm so frustrated with this film because it looks great. Just like Gareth Edwards knows how to work with visual effects here, and there are some stunning shots in this film. Like, I particularly love the most mesmerizing shot, I think, is when they encounter this herd of these towering kind of like, I think they're called like Spinosauruses, where they basically have very long, thin tails that kind of like wrap around, almost kind of like a very long spine. So watching them, like, these long tails like curl around all these different dinosaurs, especially when like they're showing affection for each other, and just watching them kind of just like float there in like this big grassy field as the human characters just marvel at it. It's a nice scene. It's like, I like this. Like, I wish, I cared more about the characters getting to this moment, but, it's, God, that's so frustrating, because it's not just that shot. Like, there's a lot of great mixture of, like, reflections in, like, the water and glass where you can see dinosaurs coming in, the way that dinosaurs will kind of, like, blend into the background. They'll slowly creep up on the human prey. That stuff is great. And then the big finale where you have, like, this giant mutant T-Rex like coming out of like the smoke, and like the flares making like the all the red smoke, and there's helicopters getting chomped down in the distance. Like, that's all really good staging. It's just like this is all like great action here. And it's like, I wish I cared more about it. I wish I cared more about the characters in danger here. But they never really established them past just like the basic archetypes of just fulfilling the bog standard. This film has more in common with like Godzilla than it does a Jurassic Park film, which I guess is fitting for Edwards, which is like, in a Godzilla film, you usually don't care about the human characters. That has changed recently with films like like Shin Godzilla and Godzilla -1, but the older Godzilla films, you typically cared more about the giant monster than you did the human characters. And that's very much the case here. All these human characters, even though like they're not trying hard to like have any relation to past Jurassic Park or Jurassic World characters, they do make some nods to like a few characters in the dialogue. But outside of that, they had a chance to actually make these characters more original and enduring. Like, they're familiar archetypes, but they have a chance to make these characters their own, and they just kind of settle into like the typical type of characters you'd expect, not just from like Jurassic Park, but from like typical adventure, creature feature B movies, where it's just like they're just there. Like, you can tell which characters are just there to be on the menu for like the dinosaurs, the ones that are just there to be red shirts and be gobbled up. But even on that angle, I was kind of a little bit underwhelmed by how many of the characters don't really have that many gruesome deaths. Like, some of the deaths are just kind of like characters being like carried off, and you don't see the brutality. Some of the characters are get eaten, and you don't get to see them really get eaten. And it's like, I know it's PG-13, I'm not expecting too much, but even like Jurassic Park allowed you to see like the lawyer get bitten off the toilet, and you got to see like his legs flail around and hear him scream a whole lot more. And there's a tiny bit of that in some of the kills here, but not as much as I'd like there to be, for especially for like a film like this, because it's very much all visual, and a lot of the visuals are great here, and I wish I cared more about the characters in such thrilling sequences as where they have to scale this towering mountain to get like the DNA of some basically like some flying dino eggs here by going into a nest, and they have to avoid like the beak chomping down on them. It's like this all looks really great on paper. It's just I need to care more about these characters, especially since I got really frustrated with how the dialogue reduced these characters so simplistically. Like at one point, they established that Henry is only doing this because he thinks that, if we get all this DNA, we could use this to save lives. What if we just, didn't charge people for it? What if we basically had just like socialized medicine? Like he doesn't flat out say socialized medicine, but he basically has a very quick line of dialogue to reduce it more or less to that. And Zora's character is basically just kind of reduces her line to, I like money, kind of. I kind of, I'm all about like the capitalism. And eventually she does come around to Henry, but it's more inexplicable than anything. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, I went through all this crap. Maybe we should just make it for free and, help everyone out and not be as greedy as the executive in this film, which you can pretty much guess his fate in this. Like, I doubt it's gonna, be that much of a spoiler for what happens to this dude, as what happens to every other greedy person in a Jurassic Park or Jurassic World movie. So, no surprises there, and I wish there were more. So, it's the type of film that I want to love. I want to love so much. It looks great on the screen. It's okay as mindless entertainment, but with how little effort it puts into making the characters anything more than just like the very basic, archetype and like the typical hallmarks of like the creature feature adventure, just frustrated me so much because there's potential here. And it's like, they have like these very basic dialogue exchanges, and like there isn't even room for like chemistry with the family, because you would think that the father here, played by Manuel Garcia Rufo, and the pot smoking lazy boyfriend played by David Icano, you would think that there would be some tension there. You think they'd fight a little bit, or that they'd have their moments where they're trying to learn to accept each other, and like this journey of trying to avoid dinosaurs eating them would bring them together more. But their line of dialogue is so passive. It feels like they had a fight before and it was like patched up before this film even began. So just like, well, what's the point? They all kind of love each other. Where's the dramatic tension here in this trip, aside from just avoiding dinosaurs? And that's when it becomes clear. It's like, yes, this film is way more interested in the dinosaurs than it is the humans, which, you know what, fine. But, at that point, why not just make it something like, what was that horror film that it was seen just from the perspective of the serial killer, in a violent nature? That's the one I'm thinking of. Why not just do a film like that? Why not just show this type of adventure specifically from the dinosaurs' point of view? Because that's basically what everyone's coming to see. That's what everyone's going, to the theater on 4th of July weekend to see. They want to see dinosaurs chomp on some people and have some mindless entertainment. And it's there, but wow, I've seen Gareth Edwards do better with his characters and the type of stories he's been given. I've seen Jurassic World and Jurassic Park films with much better characters than the ones that are presented here. Like this just kind of feels like just lazy cookie cutter versions of like similar characters that I've seen before. And to a degree, yes, Jurassic World films did have a lot of those, including just, bringing back in the cameos here. But that's what's so disheartening about Rebirth, is that it had a chance to not be that, to not be reliant on the other films here. And it just feels like it's just kind of falling back on that when it really doesn't have to. So, a lot of potential was in Jurassic World Rebirth, and it's only partially there. Like, Gareth Edwards is still a great director. He knows how to direct great visual effects scenes with these dinosaurs, but he needs a much better script than the one that he's given here. So, yeah, it's a visually stunning film. I think, as mindless summer popcorn entertainment, it's fine, but, if you've been through this ride before, if you've been through all the Jurassic Park films and all the Jurassic World films, I get the feeling like this is kind of gonna be a little bit more of a disappointment, simply for the fact that it feels more like a lesser Godzilla film than a better Jurassic World film.